Observing photography legends past and present can help us gain a better appreciation for this medium to help benefit our photographic processes. I've covered 26 photographers on this channel now, and I've learned a lot. The importance of the techniques and philosophy of each photographer is what I've found to be most valuable. Today, I want to look back at the artistic philosophy that these photographers share with us to take a more concentrated look at how these legends think about photography and how it can help inform what we create. This is Insight for Inspiration, Photographic Philosophy. The Suffering of Light is one of the first photo books I purchased, and I think it's an early purchase for many street photographers who want to take things more seriously. The only problem with it is that it's a little overwhelming how many great photos are in this book, especially if you have nothing to compare it to. Alex Webb is a great teacher and mentor of photography who continues to offer workshops and writings that reflect on his methods and philosophy on photography. He stated, "The rewards in photography are so fleeting, so unpredictable, that the only true fulfillment comes from creation. Having more realistic expectations every time I go out and shoot is something that makes the whole process more enjoyable. And if you can keep that mindset, it continues to make the whole process more satisfying every time you go out." Webb is also well known for saying, "Street photography is 99.9% about failure. So often I feel defeated by the street. Sometimes I find, however, that if I keep walking, keep looking, keep pushing myself, eventually something interesting will happen." Having the ability to be patient and have faith that something will come your way is part of the creative process for every art form, whether we like it or not. Knowing that Suffering the Light is a collection of the best of the 0.1% of all the photos Alex Webb took over years and years of photography should be taken as a lesson on the benefits of patience, realistic expectations, knowing what photos you've taken truly make the cut as worth publishing, and realizing that good things come through dedication over long spans of time. Photography isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. The hate for gatekeepers and elitists seems to be growing all over all art spaces, which is a beautiful thing to see. Joel Meyerowitz is the embodiment of the exact opposite of all of those things. He's released several books as well as videos on techniques that he's learned over the span of his career, and has an endless wealth of information for anyone looking to take photography to another level. This quote from Meyerowitz showcases that. "We think of photography as pictures, and it is, but I think of photography as ideas. And do the pictures sustain your ideas, or are they just good pictures? I want to have an experience in the world that is a deepening experience, that makes me feel alive and awake and conscious." Beyond thinking about crafting his photography, he also believes that photographs teach you about your own unraveling past, or about the immediacy of yesterday. They show you what you look at. If you take a photograph, you've been responsive to something, or you looked hard at it. Hard for 1,000th of a second, hard for 10 minutes, but hard nonetheless. And it's the quality of that bite that teaches you how connected you were to that thing, and where you stood in relation to it, then and now. Saul Leiter and Alfred Herzog are two photographers who redefine the view of color photography as something that should be taken more seriously. Each of these photographers is highly revered, and each teaches us that you don't have to travel far to take good photographs. Alfred Herzog practically never left Vancouver and made a unique body of work within the limitations of photographing one city throughout the majority of his life. No one has captured Vancouver as extensively, and the photos work as a kind of time capsule for the place that is truly one of a kind. Saul Leiter shot a majority of his photos within 2 blocks of his apartment in New York City's East Village, and has a body of work that is one of the most loved out of any street photographer ever. The two photographers also share a similarity that neither were incredibly well known until later in life, so they clearly loved photography outside of gaining fame and admiration from it. Reflecting on this, Saul Leiter has stated, "I've never been overwhelmed with the desire to become famous. It's not that I didn't want to have my work appreciated, but for some reason, in some secret place of my being was a desire to avoid success." In terms of taking photos over the course of his life, Alfred Herzog said, "You know, what we put into our pictures is not a smart idea. What we put into our pictures is our whole life, and our whole intellectual discourse. Everything we know and everything we have done, and everything that's in our history goes into every single picture we take." If you hate what's going on in the artistic space that you love, then try to change it, like Daido Moriyama and Hosoe. Both photographers disliked the straight photography that was going on in post-war Japan, so they got incredibly weird with their images and techniques to say something different. Moriyama embraced this anti-straight photography approach, stating, "My approach is very simple. There is no artistry. I just shoot freely. For example, most of my snapshots I take from a moving car, or while running, without a finder, and in those instances, I am taking pictures more with my body than my eye. My photos are often out of focus, rough, streaky, warped, etc." Uncle Hosoe's abstract images and various techniques were so far removed from the documentary photography going on at the time that he, along with the collectives he was part of, helped change Japanese photography forever. Both men became legends because of their ability to say something unique and different with their photography that highlighted the differences they wanted to see. The death rattle of social media is upon us in terms of apps and sites related strictly to still photos. Many photographers moan about this without any attempt of finding solutions or creating spaces that actually work as purely dedicated to photography as places where photography can thrive. I don't know what the solution is to this problem, but my guess is that creating unique work that is worth having a conversation about and dialogue with would be a better place to start than following trends or engagement hacking for likes and followers. Fleeting engagement doesn't have to be the be-all, end-all motivation for our work. Like Moriyama and Hosoe, we need to be the change we want to see in the world. And furthermore, we have to practice what we preach. The change I want to see is for people to focus on knowledge about photography projects past and present, so that more deep thinking on photography and discussions around it will come of it. It's hard to have a large impact on this change, but I hope through my continued focus on it, maybe I'll at least have some impact, no matter how small it is. The change I can see in my own life is that I've had a lot more fun talking to people as a result of this channel about photography and things related to it than I have on any kind of social media in a very long time. Stephen Shore and Hiroshi Sugimoto are two wildly different photographers who may have never been mentioned in the same breath before, but there's one big commonality in their work. Both men have not been afraid to experiment regardless of the outcome. Nearly all of Sugimoto's photos are conceptual or experimental. Shore's work doesn't always lean into this, and not to the same degree, but between his mimetic snapshots, postcard prints, and 3D lenticular prints, he's worked on his fair share of experiments. Stephen Shore's reasoning for experimentation is summarized in this quote: "Whenever I find myself copying myself, making pictures whose problems I've already solved, I give myself new issues to pursue." Sugimoto's work has mostly all stemmed from different experiments to answer photographic questions related to interest he had about what could be created with the medium. All that resulted from these experiments started with his diorama project that he reflected on, saying, "My life as an artist began the moment I saw that I succeeded in bringing the bear back to life on film." Candid photos and remaining undetected are staples of street photography philosophy. Some would even argue that if a photo doesn't have that, then it isn't really street. You might argue that both of these photographers fall into the category of documentary photography. Whatever the case, their work is great, and certain projects show the power of knowing your subjects personally. Gordon Parks' projects Harlem Gang Leader and A Harlem Family, along with Deanne Arbus's projects that dealt with a number of different types of people, were all created through knowing those subjects well and feeling mutual comfort and respect between photographer and subject. I fall into the camp of trying to stay candid as well, but studying these two has really opened my mind up to the possibilities of what could be created by building bonds with the types of people that I would like to photograph. According to Abbas, for me, the subject of the picture is always more important than the picture. In relation to this, Gordon Parks stated, "The photographer begins to feel big and bloated, and so big he can't walk through one of these doors because he gets a good byline. He gets notices all over the world and so forth. But they're really, the important people are the people he photographs." If I'm looking for a story at all, it is in my relationship to the subject, the story that tells me, rather than that I tell. The subway project Bruce Davidson spent 5 years on is one that told a story of a place that we can no longer experience in the same way, and it's one that impacts many looking to dive deeper into the world of street photography. I wanted to transform the subway from its dark, degraded, and impersonal reality into something that opens up our experiences again to the color, sensuality, and vitality of the individual souls that ride each day. My main takeaway from researching this project is just how important sticking to a project is. While it might seem mundane in the moment, the world is changing at a breakneck speed, and we have to consider how our everyday lives might be potentially interesting for future generations, as a way of tracking how change is occurring. Finding a specific focus for this type of project is hard, but I'm constantly pondering it and seeking it out, and I think it's really important that every photographer does this, if they're not doing it already. From the lives of the work of Robert Frank, Harry Gruyaert, Abbas, and Koudelka. Each of these photographers has had their life and work radically altered as a result of travel that helped them redefine their work or continue to push on in light of their situations to create more deeply focused work. Robert Frank's book, The Americans, has held up because of its ability to capture the United States from an outsider's lens. Gruyaert began shooting in color and became one of the early photographers who defined its value as a result of trips he took outside of his own country to places he felt couldn't be captured in black and white. Abbas captured conflicts far and wide after seeing the impacts uprisings had on his home country. Getting outside of your comfort zone, even if it isn't to a foreign land, it's just something different, can possibly change the trajectory of what you're doing as a photographer. And you'll never know unless you get out there and experience something new. I respect Koudelka's ability to fully embrace his photography as a central focus of his life. I'm always envious of anybody who's willing to do this for their art because it's so incredibly difficult. According to Koudelka, personally, I've had the good fortune of always being able to do what I wanted, never working for others. Maybe it is a silly principle, but the idea that no one can buy me is important for me. I refuse assignments, even for projects that I've decided to do anyhow. It is somewhat the same with my books. When my first book, the one on the gypsies, was published, it was hard for me to accept the idea that I could no longer choose the people to whom I would show my photos, that anyone could buy them, and it never seemed important to me that my photos be published. It's important that I take them. There were periods where I didn't have money, and I would imagine that someone would come to me and say, "Here is money. You can go do your photography, but you must not show it." I would have accepted that right away. On the other hand, if someone had come to me saying, "Here is money to do your photography, but after your death, it must be destroyed," I would have refused. Alfred Stieglitz's work really made me understand the value of studying those who have established the medium. Their techniques might not resonate as much for me, simply for the fact that many of them are so far out of my wheelhouse that I could never consider trying them. So it's not for the techniques themselves, but how they thought about them in relation to photography. Stieglitz changed how he thought about photography a number of times throughout his life, and that caused what he created to keep growing, changing, and evolving. Part of the fun of photography comes from trying new things, and I never want to feel like what I'm doing is growing stale or causing me to lose interest. Studying his work as he went from pictorialism to modernism to abstracts and then to portraiture of his wife really made me think about what he would have continued to experiment with today and what I could experiment with. Probably not to have any kind of impact on photography as a whole, but to at least continue to push myself forward. I also think a deeper understanding of photography as an art is necessary to do this. Stieglitz himself reflected on this saying, "Before the people at large, and for that matter, the artists themselves, understand what photography really means. As I understand that term, it is essential for them to be taught the real meaning of art." Thanks for watching. Please like, share, comment, or subscribe. Until next time, keep developing.